welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today's podcast is the dangers of putting someone on a pedestal or in a pit. So this is a magnificent concept that influences so much of our life in infatuations and fantasies and resulting nightmares and resentments. So this is definitely one of Bridget's geniuses, something that I am continuously mining and mindful of. So we're really looking forward to having this conversation. And before we do, we'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner, drop in your email address, and once every week or two or three, we will send you off an email that has links to everything that's out in the world via us so that you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper and make sure you don't miss anything. So nourishingthemother.com.au.
And I just got to say that you're going to hear a little bit of background noise because we are still here in lockdown in Melbourne. And
still in lockdown.
It's just beyond a joke now, really, isn't it? So you're going to hear potentially quite a lot of family sounds through this podcast. So thanks for your patience with that. I'm really excited we're doing this topic because actually I realise how much this is such a part of yours and my language and view of the world. And I know that we probably weave it through the podcast in little comments here and there and haven't gone deep on it for a number of years possibly. So it's really great for us to be really deeply descending into this framework, I think, for understanding humans and relationships and dynamics.
Totally. So I thought maybe we could just riff on what the actual general concept means initially. So the way that I look at it is, of course, going to be an energetic understanding, and then I would really love for you to take the consciousness with a little bit more tangibility. Bridgie, is that cool with you?
Sure.
So the way I think of it is an energetic polarity. So if we imagine the universe is constructed upon symmetry and laws that are continuously looking for a level of equanimity and equilibrium. So whenever we put someone on a pit and that seesaw ascends, so someone's above us, we are unconsciously self-minimizing and putting ourselves down. Now, so when they're up on the pedestal. So when they're up on the pedestal, we're down. We may not have put ourselves in a pit, we may not think, but in relation to how high they are and we've put them or their traits above us, we are lower than, which universally our psyche nor our soul nor the universal construction of energy will maintain or manage particularly long before it needs to try and come back to some level of homeostasis, in which case we will seek unconsciously to manifest circumstances in which, if we don't consciously remove that person off of the pedestal, we will take them down and it will turn into resentment. So what we loved and adored so hardcore for such a almost like blinkers or blinders on, we will then flip and almost experience the resulting nightmare of that. Conversely, if we put someone else into a pit, we raise ourselves above them. So we start to experience pride or self-righteousness because we've put this person down below us now. So we've minimized the other and put ourselves above. And again, not sustainable. So we will seek to bring ourselves down. If you've put, let's say, I'll talk about, me as the mother wound. If I've put my mother down in the pit for so long, all of a sudden in my own parenting that I'm quite self-righteous about, I will become my mother and I will instantaneously again remove myself off of the pit, and we begin to create a level of sameness. I'm just like my mother. And we start to have these huge ups and downs psychologically and emotionally because we're not self-regulating in some form of more of an equal symmetry. Do you want to add anything to that?
Beautiful. I thought that was an excellent description. Because, and I'm, as you're talking, I'm thinking, because this is the honeymoon effect as well, right? So people talk about the beginning of a relationship, it's so hot and there's so much sex and there's so much just lustiness, and I just want to have you and I want to eat you and I want to consume you. That's infatuation. And that also happens with babies, right? So when we see a newborn baby and they're so beautiful and you just want to cuddle them all the time and eat them, and then you hit toddlerhood, and toddlerhood is designed to break your infatuation, because infatuation is not true love. It's one-sided. And so, and the same thing happens, if you don't understand this, you'll move from relationship to relationship to continue to seek the same feeling that you got when you're infatuated, but ultimately to really wholly the highs and lows, right? And you'll run into the resentment if you're holding on to a picture of someone or something being always supportive, always lovely, all of the feel-good stuff. And so nature so perfectly designs it so that we will have some kind of experience in which we will perceive the other side in order to break our one-sided view of something. And so I often, when I'm working with clients, I often like to track back and go, okay, so if you're feeling like that about this person right now, well, what kind of fantasy did you have on them to be this particular way? So in the scheme of, a mother-in-law who you deeply resent, did you have a particular fantasy about how supportive she might have been when you had children, or how much she might help your family when when you were moving home, for example, and that if you had a fantasy on a particular person to provide something, then you're going to face an equilibrating nightmare in order to take that person off, out of this one-sided world and see the other side, which is ultimately also functional for us to see more of ourselves. Whenever I'm get resentful perhaps to my husband, I often turn the mirror back and go, fuck, I'm super resentful to him right now. So what's that really meaning about me? Where am I really finding it hard to accept that trait that I'm seeing in him, in myself right now? Because I'm only running into it.
And where do I have a fantasy of being or him being the opposite? So it can be either, right? So we can be resentful on someone who's expressing a trait that we ourselves are unconscious of, though we will be expressing it.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's the hardest thing to run into, particularly if you have a real attachment to your identity as being a particular way. So, if you think that you're this amazing, conscious, spacious parent who doesn't get angry, and you're denying any part of you that's not that, then there'll be somebody in your world who represents all the things that you're pushing down, and you'll keep running into them. So maybe it's your partner who you perceive parents totally different to you. Maybe it's your mother or your mother-in-law who you think is disrespectful to your child, for example, because somebody has to play the role of the disowned parts that you're not willing to own or accept.
Because the truth is, on this plane, we tend to run in a dualistic version of self and other, right? Whereas from the spiritual plane, we're looking at all is one, all is source, and the space of non-separation and non-attachment. So whichever you're running, pedestal or pit, you're creating a separation and a division, and you're putting either self or other higher or lower, minimizing self or other, or putting above self or other. So whenever that is happening, there's an instability there and a greater degree of separateness, which is going to try and have the equal polarity pull to bring you back into sameness and wholeness. would you say as well?
Yeah, and then I'm thinking about how much I love you. I love how you weave this energetically, because I've actually just chosen to jump into your amazing
embark. I know. I'm so excited that you did.
I'm so excited because I witnessed this like energetic mastery within you, which actually recognizes your capacity in an embodied way to actually shift the polarity with your own energy. Like, I see how you do this, and it's an art form. Like, I can map things consciously, but to see the artfulness with which you can do that with your energy, I think is profound. And so I'm super excited to soak it in. Because I really want to deepen my capacity to work with this. And I think, you know, anybody who is a practitioner or who works with women or who really wants to embody this on a deeper felt sense for themselves, I mean, I think it's just such a beautiful offering to
thank you.
You know, descend into this environment of deep learning and uncovering.
And depth, like fucking depth. I don't know. I thought I would never become that, you know, cranky old woman who's like, oh, the young folk of today. Perhaps I ran a fantasy, because what I find myself doing is getting incredibly cynical about the coaching industry as it exists now. Because I have such a reverence for the space and capacity that we have as gatekeepers and healers to the underworld, to the feminine, to women. And I know that women are the keepers of life energy. And I have such a profound reverence and such a touch point on understanding how precious that opportunity is that we have as the healers or the gatekeepers, that these women come to seek a pathway to their own greatness, that it makes me cringe and recoil at the fact that everyone's just becoming a coach now. And I think, fuck, but what does that mean if you don't have a regulated industry that has a grounding level of qualifications or an insight or understanding on what it means to be a healer, what it means to touch someone's psyche, what it means to have the profound opportunity to open them up and heal and allow them to integrate and remember parts of themselves that potentially haven't been for a lifetime or many lifetimes. I mean, depends how, you know, spiritual and woo you want to get about it. I just think, fuck, why are we dabbling at the surface? You can't deeply transform shit unless you're going to dive deep. And the only way you're going to dive deep is if you really understand what's happening below the surface like this, right? Because or else what happens is, and I've had so many clients this year, I can't tell you, with particularly in couples world, they're going through, you know, a resentment of some sort, and they'll come to me and we like break open with like this, right? I just know these polarities of resentment and infatuation, and where one's over empowered, someone will be under empowered, and you know, all of the complexities that you and I talk about in here all of the time. And they will have come from many different offices of many different people who have just gone, oh, he's an asshole, you need to leave. Or, you know, well, that's clearly, you know, this isn't going to work, off we go. And I'm like, oh my God, if you don't understand what is happening below the surface, you've missed your opportunity for growth. And so I don't know if I explained that very well because I feel it in my body, but I understand with so much depth and clarity the opportunity that we have to embody our own sacred energy and be able to channel it not only for ourselves but in the service of awakening, healing, and opening those whose lives we have the opportunity to touch. That if you don't know what you're doing, it just kind of scares me what can happen. You know,
I totally know.
Yeah, I know, you know, and I'm just like, oh God, oh God.
And I think also, I also think though, like at the other end of the scale, there are simply people who don't want to do the deeper work.
No, and of course that's true.
And so of course, you know, we have, like, if we consider that, you know, yours and my value systems are for natural birth, and that we really see birth as a profoundly awakening process, and that why wouldn't you, like, just give everything to it? That's really not some people's area of growth, area to desire to grow.
That's true.
And so there has to be practitioners, you know, and psychologists and mainstream mental health workers who need to meet people who
I can get off my self-righteous high horse. Well done, Bridget.
Well, I just want to put it out there because it is a pathway, right? And they'll also true. I think about, like, Elizabeth Gilbert when she says, and there's a point at which you just get sick of your own bullshit. And I actually think that that's part of it too, is that there's a point at which you run your story for long enough and you go, I'm fucking done with my story. Yeah. So somebody help me bust my fucking story.
Yeah.
And that is the work that you do and that we seek to do.
It is.
Both, you know, with your clients and with yourself, right? But this human behavior is so patterned that we create stories, but ultimately any memory is not whole.
No, exactly.
Because a memory we can only perceive a very narrow, you know, bits of information from the past, and then we create layers of story based on that particular memory. We make it mean something, and then if there's hurt and pain there, then we layer upon layer upon layer upon it, and then we make somebody else wrong, because it's easier to make somebody else wrong than actually, like, feel into what that is. Yes. And the work that you're doing with couples is essentially taking off those layers so that they can see those dynamics.
It is, but actually, even as you were saying that, I was thinking, and that's why I made Embark, because I got to this point where I was sick of watching the bullshit, and I was sick of my own bullshit going, what the fuck? You know, doing some of this. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing about it, Julie? You're just going to sit here and, you know, moan about the situation? Right. Like, you're going to cast that shit out, or you're going to do something about it?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, all right. We're here. We're at the point now where I need to teach, because there's people who don't know what I know, and there is no access portal to that. So if I don't honour and step up to the plate, I can't just sit there and moan about the fact that they don't know when I do and I'm not teaching it. So that's when I went, okay, all right. Be the medicine that you wish to see in the world, right? So I created Embark literally with that vision of going, it's time to hand it over. It's so I want to say masterful, but it feels more like in my energy field than that. It's in me to such a level that now I'm ready to just hand that over and have other people, and you know, it's all part of the feminine rising. I think we've got to have spaces where women really honestly understand the depth and the integrity, and they hold that within them, and we create these satellite cities of women just opening up and awakening, and that happens through the creation of sacred space and transformation and understanding and reclaiming of our energetics and our feminine embodiment and what that means to shift that in another person. So yes, sacred space and group gatherings, it doesn't matter if they're online or if they're in person or if it's women's circle or it's not. The creation of a sacred space held by a fully embodied woman who knows the power of her own energy to transform yours is fucking magnetically epic. So why would we just fuck around and go to the shops when we could go and have, you know, like a complete spa of transformation? I'm going off on a tangent here. But my point is, this is why I started Embark, because I was like, I don't want to do it all, and I want to see it in the world more than I do now. So that's what I want to be able to teach then. Let's do it. So women's circle, sacred space, masculine, feminine, energetics and movement in yourself and another, and what it means and how to actually coach with a level of integrity that doesn't play at the shallows. I'm in for the like, let's sink our teeth into it. Let's trace it back, work out what's going on here, and really create an opportunity for this woman to transform. Because when you transform women, you transform the world,
right?
It feels so clear to me.
I know. But you and I have been in this space for so long. It's like, well, of course, because the women are the mothers, and they are the you know, they're life incarnate, right? Like they're everything that moves, and they're everything that everybody sees.
Yeah. exactly. So one of the dangers I ran into in this was with women entering my space and then infatuating with me, which is part of why I wanted to have this conversation, because you and I were shit scared to start Nourishing the Mother because we didn't want to be anybody's guru. We didn't even want to own parenting coach as a label. We were like, no way. And same thing for me when I started doing conscious relationship. I was like, oh, do I want to own that? I don't know. I don't really want to be a relationships coach, you know. And whenever you enter the space of someone who is vastly empowered in something that you are currently learning, there is going to be a level of infatuation with that. But what you want to do is make sure that you're self-equilibrating, because or else it becomes a disastrous. You will knock them off of that and you will hate them if you infatuate for too long.
You totally will. And, you know, this has been characteristic of some of the patterning that's happened in mine and Julie's relationship over the years, and traces back for me through friendships and through early childhood. And so I can recognize my own patterning in it, but I can also deeply recognize the function of it, because what happens is we create an infatuation which builds an enormous amount of energy and heightened sensory capacity. When we have heightened sensory capacity, we can also learn quicker. We can ingrain information more readily. We can create really powerful memory, particularly if whatever we're wanting to infatuate with is really high in our values. So we have reasons why we do it, but when we can be aware of why infatuation is there and how it works, we then get to harness it in more conscious ways and do that in such a way that means that we don't give up ourselves, because what often happens in infatuation is that you give up yourself and you try to inject the beliefs, the values, the ways of being of the person that you're infatuating with, and you minimize yourself.
Yeah.
And you think that you need to be like that person, and in doing that you actually cut off your own truth and you water down your own wisdom in order to be like who you think you should be. But the truth is, anything that you see in that person you have to the exact same degree, but it's in your own unique, like a fingerprint, way. It's because we all have profound wisdom, knowledge, expertise. It's just in a different area of life. And if we haven't valued what we have, and often we don't because it comes naturally and we just think that that's how everybody is, that we won't see it and we continue to self-minimize, and the chasm between the infatuation and the self-resentment grows so big that then it ends up, in order for us to reclaim ourselves again, we flip the infatuation that we have with that person into a resentment in order for us to get back into equanimity with that person and ourselves. But if we don't do that in a way that is constructive, it becomes actually quite a destructive force, and it harms relationships. And this is ultimately what undoes so many relationships, really, across any sphere: parent-child, business partnerships, intimate relationships. If you don't have the awareness of how infatuation works and how it breeds resentment, and the resentment in itself, which is hiding behind the infatuation, actually then undermines the person, then we're missing out so much of seeing and claiming our power, and also witnessing and honouring somebody else in theirs. Because the truth of it is that we only see that which we're seeking to love more of in ourselves. Love meaning appreciate, integrate, revel in. But the process of becoming more whole is that we will go through this pattern of infatuation until we own what we see in that person and see where we're also that. And that's what I really want for the women who work with Julie to understand as well, because I witness it, I see it, I've experienced it myself. And through the process of this is where some of my mastery is, of around holding the polarity, like holding, that's really a genius of mine, is being able to hold the polarity of both sides and work beneath what you're telling me or what I'm seeing to understand what's happening. Because otherwise, and this is also what happens in coaching and any kind of mentorship, is that if you infatuate with yourself or with your own knowledge or set of values, then we'll also project onto the other person, and to be a really good leader.
Oh, you mean like me saying that coaching's shallow?
No, I'm not like saying that. But you know, but I think for all of us to become self-aware of our self-righteousness, right? Because we will do that.
100%.
And that's
we think it's so right. It's the truth.
Yeah. But the thing is, if every single soul is here for the perfect manifestation of who they are to be in the world, then in fact every piece of work in the world
really true.
is here for somebody. It's not, we're not choosing it, and we can see how what we talked about, like some of the mainstream psychology can keep people wrapped in their stories and keep people not seeing the whole. But it's also about the development of human consciousness, and how the fact that it is a spectrum, and that some of us can access more of it in some areas of life, and others can access a bit more in other areas of life, and everybody is here for the healing and the contribution to the whole, essentially.
Yeah,
but why I think it's really valuable to understand how this works is that when you can do that as any kind of leader or coach or mentor or professional, is to understand the intersection between what you value and how you're perceiving this person, and who they are, and what their story is, and their values.
Totally.
Because particularly if you are a point of someone's infatuation, then you become very, very powerful.
I know. It's kind of terrifying in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Do you want to talk about that? Because that, I think, is something that people need to understand. That comes with responsibility.
It comes with enormous responsibility. I think I've spent numerous conversations with you on this, particularly this year, particularly with couples, is the level of responsibility, even on one-on-one coaching, that I have felt with that when you become part of the process that has broken someone open in an expansive way, and all of a sudden they have this cataclysmic kind of, gamma burst recalibration of who they are, there can begin to be, oh my God, this kind of savior complex type of thing, right? Yeah. Which we see throughout the world in a number of different forms. And I'm always extremely cautious when I see that I make sure that I equilibrate myself for them. Because the responsibility that you have in those moments is it actually feels for me more intense than what it feels for me balancing my children's life in my hands. You know how you have that feeling sometimes that the preciousness that you hold and the responsibility of life sometimes feels too immense for one human to have. And I think you get glimpses of that with parenting, where you realize life or death in so many ways hinges on my hand. And I feel that responsibility in coaching when I watch people completely recalibrate in front of my eyes. I mean, it's the philosopher's stone. It's really the most extraordinary experience, watching someone totally transform in front of you. And then watching the ripples as that moves out from their life is extraordinary. And I feel a profound gift with that. But with great power comes great responsibility. And if you don't wield that power appropriately, and we know how humans have, perverted power. I think it's an unconscious shadow manipulation that you need to be conscious of in your own humanity. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but I have sat with this very profoundly, because I know at certain points, whatever I say that person would do, that's what the infatuation can be. And I'm exceptionally careful with those moments, because that life is not mine to play with. And that life is for someone else, for that person to own and rule and claim and be in. But if they are in an infatuation and they depend or are codependent or rely on you for that, it's an exceptionally, I think it can be a very harmful place to be. So, I mean, this is practitioner knowing, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure, particularly if you're in the space of counselling, that this will be part of a conversation that you will have. But even with that, I wonder if we lose touch sometimes with the level of responsibility that's there. So And because I don't want anyone self-minimizing around me either, like the women that I work with, the women that I have in Embark, I fucking want them to rule the world. I want them to be magnificent out there. I want to give them and open in them anything that this, my body of light has managed to manifest. I want that to be in you and you to mix it in your own magnificent, I think of it like a watercolor, whatever their rainbow is, we'll just add a drop of mine in there and they'll mix it up and they'll spit it out as something completely different. And that's what it should be. Like that, I don't want it to be a clone of me because that's a self-minimizing of you. That's not a truth of you. That's some pale version of who you think you have to be in order to gain some sort of abundance that exists outside of you because you haven't witnessed it inside of you. I don't want that. It is my worst nightmare that someone would do that because I want so much for women to come through whatever gateway I'm able to open, knowing that they will take these ribbons of color with them and they will make the most magnificent art out there. So by fuck, if I see anybody starting to go, oh, but I can't do it like Julie or blah, blah, I'm like, stop it. Because it's not good for you and it's not good for me.
And just watch me do something really offensive to you. So
right. Right. And I think that's part of the gift that you and I have is that we've always brought a level of candidness to whatever this is. Like we've always said, we're totally human. Like we're still processing our edges and we'll continue to. We still have days where my mother flips out of my mouth or out of my, in previous, I'm not anymore. I'm pleased to say that I really have transformed a whole lot of shit. But coming from a violent background, there's times that anger and rage has left my body with my own children and I am mortified by it. Like we're all human processing continuously. And if you are infatuating with someone, you are not seeing their wholeness. You are choosing to love only the parts that are pleasing to you and you are ignoring the parts that are not pleasing to you. And that is not good for you and that is not good for the other person and you will end up hating each other.
And I think this is really important to say too in parenting as well, is that when you consume the level of parenting teaching that you and I have over the years, it's very, very easy to believe that you can be some kind of more evolved human that doesn't have the full gamut of human experiences. And I think that that's dangerous because
I think you've fallen off your own pedestal.
Because if you inject this kind of constantly calm Zen version of perfectly spoken parent who never raises her voice and who always has time to play and who has a perfect house and whose relationship is effortless all of the time, if that's what you're filling your world with, then any glimpse of any truth of reality is going to sting. And so that's what you and I've always tried to do with the podcast is to be as real as we can possibly be about both, yes, our values and yes, what we're unapologetic about.
Yeah, but also we're not here to self-minimize either.
Yeah, that's right. We're not here to self-minimize because we're also here to say that we have wisdom and we have things that we want to impart and we know that we have a level of skill developed, but we're also humans and we will constantly get given things to grow through. But that difference is that is on the path of mastery.
Yes.
And not, something that says we're failing, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. I was sitting with this today actually and thinking about, I grew up with a mother who was always impoverished and was English, so grew up post-war. One of 4 children, often not even money for food. They would get farmed out just so other families, because they couldn't afford to look after all of their children. It's messy. And we lived in England for about 3 years. And in England, there's the most enormous divide between the haves and the have-nots. And so we were always the have-nots. So we grew up, on the wrong side of the tracks type of thing. And there was the haves who we had all sorts of resentments and structures around, right? And so I've always kind of grown up with this awareness around, the people that have and the people that have not, and this very clear divide.
And chasm between the two.
Yeah. And today I was really, really sat in my body where I was like, holy shit. There are no haves and have-nots because we all have.
And have not.
Like we all have.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can get to the point of being so out of touch with your own empowerment that you perceive you have not in comparison to someone else is such a minimizing and disservice that disempowers you in the process, but also this world is worse for it.
But I also do wonder if that's by design, though, that our societies are orchestrated and structured in such a way that the working class and middle class perceive that. Because if you look back through there's a lot of value. It's kind of like, I wrote a post. It's kind of like my post about, like you keep the infighting happening within the people so that at the top you can just pull the strings. So this is really the
but this is also, I get what you're saying, but in a utopian world, if we all just have, then everybody would be empowered.
But is that going to happen? Never.
Come on, Bridget.
Because we don't live in the utopian world. We live in a dualistic world. And no level of meditation will take you out of the dualistic world. But when you understand it, when you understand it, and when you see it for what it is, and when you see yourself putting someone on a pedestal and putting yourself in a pit and thinking you don't have enough, you ask yourself, well, where do I have what I see in them?
Right. Where do I have?
Because you do. You have whatever wealth you perceive in the world.
Yes.
You can't perceive it if you don't have it.
Yes. Yes, but we attach only one form of wealth.
That's right.
Abundance or scarcity. If you simply looked at where am I abundant and where am I scarce, it would simply be empowered, disempowered, but it's not not that you do not have, it's just your abundance. And in eras gone by, when we didn't have this man-made construction of money, that abundance would have equated and been able to be traded to manifest all of the abundances that you needed, right? Like in the world of that, I would be trading my energetic services for sheep and herbs and, cloth, and we would live an abundant life simply because there's an energetic exchange of goods and services.
Yeah.
But now we have this one man-made version of money. All of a sudden we get into this scarcity mindset of something that we've created.
And the thing is also we've created it, but we've created our own disempowerment through the process of creating a system.
Exactly.
And so this is also purposeful for human evolution, because we get to the point of having created systems which work for a period until they no longer work for the masses who use them, and then we are called to evolve them. And that's what's happening globally at the moment across a huge number of systems. But that's a messy process, just like the process of taking people off pedestals is a messy process, because then you have to go, oh, fuck, like I can't live this world which has been set up for me to idealize celebrity and idealize the experts and minimize myself because what do I know? And instead go, actually, who am I? What do I have? How can I serve? What's my gift here? Where am I magnetic? How can I leave this earth better in my perception better when I leave it than how I found it when I arrived? And all of that requires us to essentially unplug from all of the systems that we have grown up in, and that tell us the world is only one way and the people are only this, and that's what that means, right? Like we're collapsing perceptions constantly in order to get to more truth. The truth being, how do we love more? Yes. And love through our service, and love through our mothering, and love through our relationships.
Yes, yes. So let's just talk very quickly before we wrap up around infatuation and nightmare. What do people do? So if you're in infatuation, what do you do if you know you're infatuated with someone?
So first of all, you figure out what it is you're infatuated with. So you can't just go, I'm just that person's so amazing and they're just so perfect and they've got everything. It's a real generalization. So what you do is you go to the thing that is the most emotional charge for you. So maybe it's like, I love the way they carry themselves in the world. I love the way they hold their body. Or maybe it's, I love how successful they are in their career. And then what you do is there's a couple of different ways. If you really, if you're very infatuated with them, what you want to do is take them off quickly. So you can take them off quickly by saying, what is the drawback to that person of that trait that we see in them? So what's the drawback of them having a highly successful career? Oh, well, they don't get to see their kids very much because they're working all the time. Is that in my values? Would I be okay if I couldn't see my kids because my career was so successful? Oh, yeah, I feel a slight shift. Nope, keep going. Oh, they've got this amazing way that they walk in the world. Oh, okay, how much time and practice does it take to develop that kind of, body that you can be like that in the world? Oh, I can see that would take thousands of hours. Yeah, and where have I dedicated thousands of hours of attention in my own embodiment or my own growth? Oh, I can see that. Would I be willing to give that up if I had to do a swap? Well, no. Okay, that takes them a bit more off the pedestal. And we keep going and we ask these questions. What is the drawback of it? Where am I also that in my own highest values? To the point where we've taken them off the pedestal and we can now put them in our heart and see that they are merely a reflection of us. And they're there for us to help ourselves see our light, see more of ourselves.
So you can love them and learn and grow from them, but don't let it slip into where you're self-minimizing and you've lost track of your own innate genius and abundance. And values.
And values, because when you get really clear on that, and values, well, Julie and I are always talking about values, and it's not, like patience and, kindness.
I think we spoke about this while in there. Was it the Reimagining Motherhood podcast?
Maybe it was that one. But it's really about what your life is demonstrating is most important to you. So it's what you live, essentially. And so if you wouldn't be willing to give up who you are based on what your life demonstrates right now for what you see in another person, what you're infatuated with, then that's where you know that the infatuation is simply a flag for you to start to look at yourself and appreciate yourself a little bit more. And don't give your power away. Because the moment you infatuate with somebody else, you are minimizing your own capacity to be empowered in the world.
Yes. So see your equal and opposite empowerment and abundance, and their equal and opposite disempowerment and chaos, which will likely and usually is always in your top values. You'll be a complete universe between the two of you. So where you're over-empowered, they'll be under-empowered, and where they're over-empowered, you'll be under-empowered. And don't forget, whenever you're seeking to learn from a coach or a guide or anyone, it's because you are under-empowered in it and you're seeking growth through the person who is over-empowered in it, which is who you should be learning from. Totally. Not the person who's under-empowered like you. So just to know that it's a function of, it will always occur, we go, oh God, I want that. Great. Want it. Use them as inspiration and, develop and evolve your own beliefs and mindsets that have created their empowerment and abundance. But don't let it flip into, oh my God, they're my answer for everything and I wish I could be like them, because then you've missed the rich abundance and enormous wisdom and work that you are here to do in the world based on your own personal life experiences.
I think the really healthy way to do it too is to see what you want to empower. So you're choosing a coach. We all choose coaches in areas that we want to empower more in our lives, right? It makes complete sense.
You should be.
Because that's what helps you evolve.
Yes.
But the key way to make it lasting and embodied is for you to link what it is that you're wanting to learn from them to your own highest values, so that you can actually go, oh, okay, I'm learning to deepen my sexuality. How does that benefit my highest value
and wisdom? And I hope that's what I talk about when we're mixing those colours, mixing like a watercolour is mix it into yours. Use it and mix it in, and then you make your own art.
It's a birthplace for greater potential, right? And that just spins out and somebody else gets inspired by that, and it just becomes this beautiful ecosystem.
Yeah, we're always pulling forward wisdom. Yeah. So you're coming in to embark with me, and you have said today yes to me that you're coming in to do a workshop on infatuation and resentment, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
At the end of November as well. So if you are a woman who is already working with women and is super ready to dive deep and understand and integrate energetic work below the surface, or you are really tapping your toes going, gosh, I really feel a calling to work with women and I want to be able to run Women's Circle and hold online events and create something that's pretty special for my community or the women that come to see me, then Embark is the place for you. This is the last time that it will be at its introductory price of $22.22 for 6 months of embodied integrated learning with me. And from the 21st of October, it will go up to $44.44, so $4,444. So it's $2,222 up until the 21st of October. So if you would love to jump into that, it will be in the show notes, or you can jump across to thepleasurenutritionist.com and Embark Embodied Leadership. So to connect with you, Bridget?
Yes, SuburbanSandcastles.com, and I'm actually just about to kick off a program called Disrupt, Revealing the Mother Wound, which comes from a lot of the work I've been doing in lockdown, actually. So if you're called to that, please join me there. And
yes, I think mother wound work is possibly one of the most profound experiences that you can work on when you're looking at becoming and being a mother that you want to be, that you're not driven by old wounds, but instead are living in an alignment and an integrity. I mean, I still think that's some of the most profound work.
Me too, and I think also it's particularly if you have like a perfect mother story, that actually there's just as much wounding in that, which is something that you and I have, unearthed more and more lately. So I'm looking forward to descending into that. So perfect. Yes, remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.